Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we're thrilled to be your host for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some really amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Mary Robinson. Mary is the founder and executive director of Imagine, a center for coping with loss in Westfield, New Jersey, and the founder and former executive director of Good Grief, located in Morristown, New Jersey. Mary has been working and volunteering in the field of grief support since 1997. On December 8, 2019, Mary Robinson was honored during the 13th annual CNN Heroes, an All-Star Tribute, which aired live from the American Museum of Natural History in New York City.
Mary, we're delighted to have you as our guest on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so Mary, you've started two thriving programs in New Jersey working on behalf of grieving children for over 20 years. And your work with grieving children has been honored by the CNN Heroes Tribute. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
I wonder if you could share about your personal story that led you to dedicate your life to this important work.
Sure. I always say that Imagine, the current grief support center I run, and Good Grief were born in my heart over 46 years ago when my father died of cancer. I was 14 at the time. I was a freshman in high school. My brother was a sophomore. My dad died of cancer. And after he died, my brother and I just did terribly. Our mom, fortunately, was extremely resilient. And even though she had just lost her best friend and the love of her life, she went to work. She had been a stay-at-home mom. When my dad was diagnosed with cancer, he had just changed jobs, so we had no medical insurance. We were really wiped out financially, and fortunately, we lived in this wonderful little town of Madison, New Jersey, where they kept providing the medicine my dad needed. You know, the pharmacy did. The electric company kept the electricity on. We got a lot of support from the community. But we were in a lot of debt after my dad died, and my mom went to work in real estate, and again, you know, just really wonderfully resilient. She is totally my hero. Made my life possible. We kept the house. She paid everybody back, but it was actually like losing a second parent because she was gone all the time. So we went from this family of four eating dinner around the table every night to a family dispersed, kind of each of us going in our separate ways and in our separate pain. It's not unusual when a family has a loss, especially the death of a parent or the breadwinner, that there's financial distress. So there's often these kind of secondary losses. Sometimes families have to move, a lot of things change. But my brother and I, we acted out, I would say, in ways typical of grieving kids, even though at the time we didn't know that's what was happening. We didn't know even the word grief. We didn't know we were grieving. My brother got involved with, after my dad died, with drinking and drugs. He ended up dropping out of school his senior year. And I, actually, when my dad was first diagnosed and I was in 8th grade, I started skipping school. And then after he died, you know, I kind of kept skipping school. My grades went down. I ended up quitting the track team, quitting the school paper, all my activities, and really started isolating myself into my 20s. I ended up getting quite depressed. And I share that, my brother's story and mine, because we were textbook examples of grieving kids. We were acting out our internal distress and sadness and fear and missing our dad, missing our family and our life as we knew it. And, you know, nobody in the school knew what to do. You know, nobody said anything. My coach didn't say, "Why are you quitting the team?" You know, nobody really said anything. And so all these years later, when I discovered that there was this field of children's grief support, it was really my great joy. I discovered this in 1997, learned of a program and started volunteering in the field, and ultimately have started these grief support centers because I wanted to ensure that other children didn't lose years of their life to unresolved grief like my brother and I did. So, we were just suppressing all of our feelings and trying to just be strong and carry on. But it was manifesting itself in our behavior. So one of the things I, say to adults and to teachers is that when you see a child's behavior change or a teenager's behavior change, it's really information. My brother and I weren't bad kids, though it may have looked like it. We were sad kids. We missed our dad. We missed our life as we knew it. And the behavior was information for the adults in our lives, to say what's going on and to check in. But there was really a complete lack of awareness back then. And fortunately, things have gotten a lot better. We're not quite there yet. But schools do know better now that when a child has a loss, especially loss due to death, to look for support, and a lot of adults know that now, whereas they didn't back then.
Well, and we're in a lot of ways, Mary, what we're doing today is shifting those stories, right? We're helping kids, giving them a place and a context and a way to express their grief in a healthy way, so that the story they tell when they're an adult being interviewed will be very different than the story that you and I might tell, right?
Yes.
In that regard.
Yeah, the story. I mean, my hope is that, again, that children don't lose years of their life, that they get support at the time of their loss, that they develop healthy coping tools, that they grow in their resiliency so that they can cope at the time of their loss with that loss, but also any future losses. I always think of they become the next generation of healers or supporters for grieving kids. And good things can come from loss, but it really helps if you get support.
It's interesting. You talked about not only the traumatic event of your dad's death, but you talk about all the traumatic events surrounding that a lot of people really don't take a look at as being the result of a death. And some of the examples that we use, we work quite a bit with young adults. And when they go into college, nobody asks, has there been a death loss? When they take a leave of absence, or when they decide to leave college for unforeseen circumstances, the questions on the reasons why, financial issues, so on and so forth, but nobody seems to really ask, was it due to a death loss? So you have all these other traumatic events or things that come into play that are upfront and obvious, but it's really due to the death loss.
Yes. Yeah. I know when I went to college, I was still grieving.
Of course.
My dad, and did not do well in college. Kind of just, did not do well, and would have really benefited from some sort of support. But, the thing is, at college, nobody knew me before. So I'm not sure they would have noticed like anything was different, but definitely a young woman not living up to her potential, still skipping school, not going to class, acting out in pretty destructive ways. And and I know young adults also who lose a parent while they're in college, and there's literally no support. At least now there's these children's grief support centers for teens and kids. But you go away to college, either showing up after having had a loss and not having support, or having a loss during college. And that's why I'd imagine we run support groups for young adults, and actively moving forward, which I'm aware of, a fantastic program as I understand it, is helping to provide support to college-age students, and it's so greatly needed. And also goes back to the need for education on college campuses,
Yeah.
about the emotional lives of kids and what behavior means.
So I have a question for you. When you were introduced by Anderson Cooper, he said, and I quote, "My dad, Wyatt Cooper, died when I was 10. For a long time, I found it difficult to speak about him, to even say his name. Too often, we go through grief alone. But you're trying to change that, especially for kids. Can you dive a bit deeper into this? Is silence a common theme today in childhood grief?"
Less so than it used to be, but unfortunately, as a society, we're not that comfortable with grief and death and dying. And so people are afraid to say anything. Children end up still being isolated with people not talking to them, with them not getting a chance to tell their story. And it's really just fear and discomfort, whether it's people in the school or in the neighborhood that and one of the things we have at Imagine is we have elephants in every single room as a symbol of,
That's great.
at Imagine, we talk about the elephant in the room, and we do conversation cafes in the community where we bring people together to talk about the elephant, to talk about death and dying, to talk about grief and loss, and to try to normalize it. That's our highest mission, trying to normalize this and help people know what to say and know how to be with grieving children and grieving families. Because silence is not helpful. I mean, unless you're facilitating a support group and you leave space for silence so people can talk more. But yeah, silence is, I mean, I don't want to say it's deadly, but I remember years after my dad died, my mom said to me, she said, I must have told the story of your dad's illness and death over 100 times in the living room to Carlin, who was her best friend. And that's when I realized my brother and I never got to tell our story. Not a single person said, how are you doing? Tell me about your dad. What was it like? And telling our story, talking about the person, sharing memories is a key ingredient to mourning our loss. And mourning is the key ingredient to how well we're going to do after any type of loss, but especially after a death. We need those witnesses and companions to listen and to be there and to let us speak and get it out. And whether we speak through words when we're teenagers or through our play and art as little kids, but we have to tell our story. So
yeah,
silence is not great.
Huh? Right. You think about silence, really, we talked about isolation. Silence is related to isolation because it isolates us in our own story. There's no one there to hear from us. We don't have the opportunity to even speak it, to hear ourselves say it. And you think about some of the things that kids work through with that. So to me, it's the beauty of the peer support model, really.
Yes.
And it is healing for kids.
Yeah. And the beauty of the peer support model is that you're with all other kids who've also had someone die. You can talk about it and nobody cringes or, everybody gets it because they all had someone die. And you can talk about everything else in your life too. And you can also just be a kid and play and nobody thinks, oh, what's wrong? Is their dad just died? Shouldn't they be sad? No, they're children. They go in and out of their feelings.
Yeah.
But I heard it said once that we need at least one person in order to mourn, one person who's a witness and who hears our story. And in peer support, you get your peers and you get those wonderful adult volunteers who are there to do nothing but listen and affirm and let you have all your feelings and who welcome your story. So.
I love that term, witness, someone to witness our story and how powerful that is. I even use it with parents. Over the years, I've tried to help parents understand. They would come and say, how can I help my child who's grieving? And I would say to them, take a few minutes at night before bed and just lay on the bed and tell them a story about your life. And then let them tell you a story about their life. And let them witness you telling that and you be a witness to them. And it's a powerful tool, even for just families, to bring families closer together.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I do too.
Well, Mary,
Story time.
yeah, story time, exactly. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and we don't want to let you go before you have a chance to share with our listeners how they can connect with you, with your work, with, if they want to make a connection, how might they go about doing that?
Well, they can visit our website. We're at imaginenj.org. And that's the best way, is just visit our website, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're in New Jersey, we would love for you to come for a tour. We do tours 3 times a month. They are moving, inspiring, educational 1-hour sessions, information sessions. And that's part of how we live our mission of education and advocacy on behalf of grieving children. And it's also how we spread the word that we're available as a free resource. But start with our website, come for a tour. I also just want to give a shout out to the National Alliance for Grieving Children. They're at childrengrieves.org. It's a wonderful resource, national resource that lets you know of all the support programs throughout the state, a lot of education and other resources available there.
That's great. Mary, we want to thank you so much for being our guest here at Let's Talk Death and for sharing your journey and the story behind your work.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, glad to have you, Mary.
Thanks for your work.
And we want to say thank you to those who joined us for this episode of Let's Talk Death as well. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all the programs and resources of Heal Grief, including our national network of support of grieving young adults. It's a program we call Actively Moving Forward.
Make sure you sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links to future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
And with that, again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk Death.